Right. So basically, so climateemergency.uk, Don and his crew have basically been reaching out to councils and getting groups together to do these climate scorecards. So, Don, please tell us about the climateemergency.uk work. Over. Thank you for coming. Great.
Oh, I was muted. Sorry about that. Hi, Phoenix. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's really lovely to be here and hear about so many people who already know about our work and have used it. This is quite a rare opportunity. So thank you so much. So my name is Don van Roland, and I am the Outreach Director at Climate Emergency UK. We are a very small nonprofit with only 4 staff members. I'm going to give you a bit of a tour about who we are and what we do, and the main project that we're currently working on, which is a 2025 action scorecards. I'm then going to move on to demonstrate how you can use the website to find out how your council is doing on their climate action. I'm then going to pass over to Phoenix to lead on a discussion on how you can use the scorecards in your own campaigning. And then I'll wrap up with some training and resources for campaigners that you can use. So to get started with our mission, Climate Emergency UK has one foot in the campaigning world. We aim to inform residents about what council can do to tackle both the climate and nature emergencies. We provide the tools needed for campaigners to come to and approach the council confidently with knowing what needs to be done and be able to formulate a campaign ask. Our other foot is in the local government world. We also directly work with local council, and we've also designed our database to be used by them directly, so they can learn from it and learn best practice and find out which council is doing the best in one area. We also mapped out everything they can do, so that, for example, if a new staff starts in the council, they can use what we created, the scorecards, to actually learn about their own council and what their council is doing on climate action. And then finally, we also try to lobby the UK government and development administrations for a statutory duty to be put on climate action. So currently your local council has a statutory duty to provide education, social care, but climate action is not a statutory duty. It's something that the council can opt out of doing, and we want to change that. And we've really made leaps and bounds recently with that. There's a bill currently going through Parliament called the Energy Target Bill, which could change and make it compulsory for councils to report on carbon emissions and their efforts toward net zero. What are the scorecards? It's an assessment of climate action that's taken by local government all across the UK. We've defined 93 actions or policies, and we've divided them across 7 sections. So climate action touches on a lot of aspects of the council's activity. Buildings and heatings. Some council own social housing, for example. So we ask them, have you renovated the homes on your social housing stock, and are they like at a good EPC rating? Transport. Have they started to convert electric buses? Planning and land use. Recently, there's been introduced a requirement for biodiversity net gain. This is something we have been asking councils to do before it became national requirements. And now we ask councils to go above and beyond that and create more space for nature. Governance and finance looks at the way that the council is structured and where if the emphasis is made on the climate where it needs to be. For example, have they mentioned the climate as a priority in their corporate plan? Are they looking for the right funding to be able to do more on a climate emergency? We've got 3 questions which are specifically on funding and whether or not they are raising funds where they should to do more. There's a whole section on biodiversity, asking councils, for example, to create more space for nature by mowing less, stop using pesticides, stop using peat in their horticultural project, as well as reducing streetlights, which is also a cost-saving measure. Then we've got collaboration engagements, which will be of interest today because this is the effort that the council puts in consulting with local community groups and the wider resident area. And we've seen like many different ways that the council engage and different levels of engagements and regularity of engagements. So we also try to promote best practice in this area. Also, what support is available to help local businesses decarbonize, the cultural sector, health partnerships. We really look at everything that the council does that can be beneficial for the environment, which is most of it. Waste reduction and food, finally, it goes way beyond recycling. We look at the school meals provided in your local schools. This is also something that is within the council's control, and whether or not they provide a fully vegetarian day. We also look at whether the councils provide funding to your local climate cafe and repair cafe, where you can bring items to be repaired. So it's a really, really thorough assessment that covers many different aspects of what your local government does. And the reason we created this is because there is no equivalent. The UK government, because the UK government hasn't created a statutory duty, there is no common reporting framework or no central guidance on what councils should or shouldn't be doing. So that's why we created the scorecards, so that they have a roadmap on everything that they can do within their powers, and then hold them accountable against that. We created the scorecards in consultation with over 90 sector organizations and individuals. That's why there are so many questions. We then followed a 3-stage process to ensure that the information that we offer is as accurate as it can be, keeping in mind that we had to adapt to over 400 councils in the UK. So obviously there's no one-size-fits-all. So there has been some effort to standardize all this information. And the first step of this process is called the first mark. This is where a team of volunteers joins us for a period of 3 months and conducts the initial research. So this is the second time that we do this. And last summer, 260 volunteers came with us to assess councils on their climate action, doing desktop research. They spent over 5,000 hours collating information about councils. The councils were also involved in this because we issued about 11 freedom of information requests per council to ask them very specific information. For example, have you recruited a planning ecologist? So when you review planning application, like, is there an ecologist in your team that's going to be looking at this application and checking that they actually respect biodiversity? So some of the questions are very specific and very niche, and therefore we needed to use freedom of information requests in order to get that information. So, but it was also triaged and processed by volunteers. Last autumn, we then moved on to the right of reply, which is an optional process where councils are provided all the information that we collected on them, and then they get the opportunity to feedback and provide any complement information that we missed. And this is quite striking. 76% of UK Council responded to our call and have actually provided further information and feedback on the scores, which really shows that they do care about climate action, but also how they show. And it really strengthened the process and makes it more accurate. So it means that even if a volunteer missed information, the council also added what they think is most relevant. So it really adds value to the process. And then finally, this is what we're currently doing, is the audit. We currently have a team of 67 auditors, including CUK staff, and we are currently checking all of the marking that has been done over the last 6 months and awarding the final marks. We're also integrating further information. There's data sets that exist, for example, on air pollution, and we're adding this into the scorecards. So we're not duplicating anything that already exists. If another organization has already been collecting information, So for example, I mentioned pesticides. So we rely on other organization, the pesticide action network, to collect that information, give it to us, and then we feed it into the scorecards. So we don't duplicate any work that already exists, but we kind of aggregate it and then add on to it. And yes, I would say the 11 freedom of information requests, this is information that was never published before. So this is probably the most valuable information from the scorecards. I'm mentioning it in future tense because we're just about to launch later this year the updated scorecards in June, but there is already a published version that you will be able to access today after this talk, and it's the 2023 action scorecards, where out of 400 UK councils, only 41 scored over 50%. So the average score was about 32%. So out of everything that UK councils can do, the average was they only did a third of the initiative that they were able to do within their powers and influence. However, the positive news is that despite being extremely limited with funding, some were able to score over 80% in some sections. So some councils have been doing really well, and it's not like the same for every council. So we've seen like a lot of like regional and local differences and a lot of variation. So it shows that despite very, very strict budget constraints, some councils have still managed to push for further climate action. You see here the range of scores varies a lot. It really shows like it's not like a uniform pictures, and there has been local successes with some councils scoring really high. You also see that we don't compare apple and origins. There are different types in the of councils in the UK, and we acknowledge that, and we don't compare councils which are too different from each other. So Northern Irish Council, for example, are in their own category, and they have their own set of questions, which is adapted and doesn't include powers that they don't have. So we've done that work in 2023, and then what we did is we tried to analyze it to understand what makes local climate action possible. And we came to a few conclusions. One of them is that to enable climate action, you need political will. You need councillors which are passionate and are going to champion climate action within the council. And so we found that having a climate action portfolio holder, which luckily is 4 in 5 councils in the UK, have their scored 11% higher than other councils who did not have a climate action portfolio holder. So if your council doesn't have one yet, it's really something that's worth lobbying for. Basically, the leader of the council just needs to name someone to lead climate action among existing elected councillors to then make that a priority. Finance is the second enabler. Council will always tell you that the main reason.
Might have an issue. Keep going. Oh, that's something going on there. I'll remove Michael. Carry on. Carry on.
So yes, so the main enabler of climate action is and the level of revenue that people are able to raise for climate action. So I've mentioned we created 3 questions on this. So councils can raise revenue for climate action by applying for funds from the UK government. They can also raise revenue by raising money from developers. And in London, millions of pounds have been raised for climate action through this.
Do you know the name of that? They raise the funds with the developers. Is it the NSIL or something?
I don't know the acronym, but I can look it up.
Yeah, that's a good one for people to get into. Okay.
And if you find that your council has, then it's also another good way in, and ask them, what have you done with all that money that you raised? And like sometimes those funds might be sitting there unused, which is something that we found. So that might be something you want to hold your council accountable. If they have raised that money, then how have they used it? And if they haven't used it yet, you might want to ask them to when they're going to be distributing it. And the third way is local climate bonds. So they can also raise money from the private sector. for something that they know is going to pay off in the future, like renewable energy. Some councils own their own electricity farm, so they can own their own wind farm, and they can raise a private revenue to do that. And the final comment I had on this slide is embedding net zero. To enable climate action locally, they need to train their staff on, they need carbon literacy within their staff. They need their staff to understand what the climate emergency is and why it's important. Otherwise, it will never be prioritized. They also need to put climate action at the top of the priority list on the corporate plan, and have the relevant. They also need to have a climate action plan, of course, to lead on all of this. So what can you use the scorecards for? You can use it to highlight and develop your understanding of the gaps in your council's climate action, understand what they are doing well and what they're not doing yet. You can also use it to compare with other councils in your immediate area, but also it could be another council in the UK. I'm going to demonstrate in just a moment how you would do that. And then there is also obviously the stated goal for you, eventually for it to help you identify a campaign, something to campaign for. So we have 94 policies that you could potentially campaign for, but this tool is also to help you prioritize. It's also a prioritization exercise. And in this illustration, I've just mapped out the 7 sections and kind of showed you, for example, that not every council is doing good in all areas. So for example, I've looked at London councils here, and then Westminster might be the top scorer for buildings and heatings with 79%. But if you're looking for who's doing the best on food and waste, it's Hackney, and they scored 69%. The scores go all the way down to 0% in London, so there's a lot of variation.
Mm-hmm.
But this is just an example of like a little regional analysis I've done. But then to bring it to life, I want to share with you a case study that we've just released with our partner My Society, which is a resident in Costford District Council. They've used the scorecards to check their council's climate performance, and then that inspired them to ask public questions, which was then put on to a full council meeting in February 2024. This then led to a one-to-one meeting with cabinet members of climate change. So this is the portfolio holder for climate change that I was mentioning before. So they did have one, so that's a good start. And then to an initiative to form a residents group that will directly help the council and discuss specific climate issues. And this is how Costford Climate Action Network was formed, which consists now in 10 residents and 2 councillors, but it is a network that is still growing. So that's an example of initiative that was born from the scorecards, and residents being empowered to use that knowledge to then take steps to approach their council and eventually create a way to hold them accountable.
This is incredible work, maximum respect. Such hard work. Thank you so much for what you guys have been doing. It's brilliant.
Thank you. This is just one example of one impact it had on one person, but obviously there are a lot more that you can see on our website. We've got like a whole section dedicated case studies. I'll share it with Phoenix in an email, so you can read about it. We've got lots of stories from council officers, but we'd love to hear it from residents. So if you have used the scorecards and you found them useful and it got you somewhere, please share your story with us. I'm now going to pause for question before moving on to the demonstration of the website and how to use it. I'm going to stop sharing this slide.
Okay, you want to ask for questions there before going into the explaining the scorecards? Okay, thank you so much, Don. That's like incredible work, really, and it's so useful. So folks, if you've got a question, do what Helen just did. Down the bottom here, there's a react button down the bottom, and you can raise a hand or lower a hand so we can see who's 1, 2, 3. So Helen, go for it. Then Nick, I think. Helen.
First on the buzzer.
Helen in Southampton, over.
Okay, so quite often, I don't want this to be taken too much in adversarial kind of sense. But you mentioned street lighting, which is a big one for me because I hate having less street lighting. It makes me feel less safe when I'm out at night. If I'm coming back from a club or someone's house at 3 a.m., you know, there might be reasons why, as a woman, I'll be like, oh, I'm not comfortable in this situation. Not everyone can afford to call an Uber, right? Or if I've got to go out and deal with, you know, I've forgotten to put the rubbish out at night and I have to go out to a dustbin area, you know, there are reasons why we should be able to feel safe, and street lighting is something. Good street lighting, because they've reduced the street lighting in my street, and my housemate had a nasty fall outside because the street lighting is no longer adequate. So I just wondered what your comment was on that.
The easy solution here is just for council to convert to LED lighting. It's something that should have been happening already decades ago, but some councils are still converting their public street lights to LED, so they can actually increase the luminosity while
Unfortunately,
reducing.
they didn't on my street. They just put the street lights on one side of the street, which isn't my side of the street. So they kind of went, oh, we can legally get away with having less street lighting. And of course, the road is still fully lit, but the pedestrian areas are very poorly lit now. It's annoying. But okay, so it's nothing about like the level or the amount or switching them off at 3 a.m. or something like that, because I think our council now does switch off the street lights in the middle of the night and stuff like that, which I think is not good, you know?
Mm.
Because it all revolves around the traffic and the road, you know, the cars, not around the people who are supposed to be able to use the streets. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. It's a good point, and we do need to, you know, I think there's something, the solar powered street lamps. I think we need to push for more as well. I might. But thank you, Helen.
Okay.
Nick.
Hi, Gautier. Thank you for your incredible work. What you're doing is absolutely brilliant.
Don.
I've got a slight quibble that I would have liked to have seen energy in, you know, as one of the main headings of your 7 headings, but that is just a quibble. I really am so impressed by what you're doing. I live in Hackney and I'm a member of Hackney Labour Party, because that's the only way to have any voice in Hackney is you've got to be in the Labour Party, well, although I've been in the Labour Party all my life. And my question is, how do you recommend that we use these scorecard results to bring pressure on local government? Because they're going to have so many answers, you know, so many evasions, so many excuses, and you know, the confrontational approach doesn't work, and anybody who, you know, is seen to criticize is immediately ostracized. So how can we leverage the amazing work you've done to encourage the councils rather than criticize them to do even more? And is it by comparing them to other councils? Is it by comparing one aspect of what a council has done to another aspect of what the same council has done? What do you recommend?
Well, I'm just about to demonstrate how you would actually go about to do that. But yes, the scorecards are here to show you everything that the council is or isn't doing, but then allow you to kind of narrow it down to something that you might want to campaign for. And then what you do with that information, it really depends on the context. It might, depending on the issue that you might be wanting to tackle, you might want to start a petition to get more local interest from the community on a specific issue. You might be wanting to ask for a meeting with your local councillor to raise this issue with them, and then hopefully get them to submit a motion, which you can help them draft. Or you could go along the route that the resident did, is basically take the initiative to ask a public question at a council meeting. So those are the steps that you could do. But then identifying the ask, this is something I'm just going to show you how you can do. It depends on the local circumstances and what you think is the highest priority. You could go for what are the low-hanging fruits. So there are actions within the scorecards which have a lower cost, so they are less likely to hit as much resistance. retrofitting all of the council building to a net zero standard will be extremely expensive. It's something we do add in our assessment, but it's likely to hit more resistance than training councillors on climate emergency, which is something that a lot of councils have already started doing. Over 100 councils have already started to train councillors in carbon literacy. So it'll be an easier sell if you want, and the cost is also much lower. So yeah, there's a lot to consider. Yeah.
That's good. That's good.
We
That's
create.
helpful. I think
We created a document called 15 actions, which narrows down to a much smaller number of actions, which we believe are easier for a council to take on if they haven't already.
is that document available on the website, or could you post it in the chat? Or
yes, it's on the website, and I will add it to the chat.
Gauthier Hoel, have I said the name correctly? Over.
Yes, absolutely. And thanks, Don and Climate Emergency UK for this amazing work. Living in London, I just wanted to ask if you've noticed any changes with the new card set compared to 2023, and if anything in this new set particularly stood out to you.
I can't comment yet on the 2025 Action Scorecard results because they will be launched in June. So far, all I can say is that we've noticed that the score have been increasing, obviously not at the rate needed to reach net zero, but they have been increasing. Yeah, more details to be shared in June during the official launch. And also all this work is still in draft at the moment. It's still being audited.
Thank you, Don. Is there a date for the official launch, or is it still in discussion?
It'll depend on the circumstances closer to the time. We don't want to clash with any of the major events, but
Okay.
it will be around mid-June.
Okay.
Okay, cool. I think after some initial questions there, Don wanted to demo how to use the scorecard so we can get more detailed into it. And then there's another little section on, how CC members can use the scorecards. And I might like to ask Fiona, who was a volunteer with Climate Emergency UK, to say something then. Don, do you want to go into how to use the scorecards? Are you going to share screen?
Yeah, let's do that.
Right. Over.
So this is the Council Climate Action Scorecards website, and you're greeted by a timeline, the one I've just mentioned to you, which brings us to June, when the next scorecards are being launched. You can already access the updated methodology on what questions are going to be included. But then if you scroll down, you access the currently published version of the scorecards, filtered by the different council types I've just mentioned. So single tier, these are councils which have all of the powers of councils. District and county, that's where the powers are divided at two different levels. Combined authority, it's a more recent form of government. You probably heard of the devolution deals. So they are becoming much more common, with 10 more devolution deals being in the work at the moment. So there is 11 in our assessment, but there'll probably be a lot more in the next scorecards. And they are like regional authorities. And then as I mentioned, you've got Northern Ireland, which has its own category. Within the single tier councils, you can now filter between England, Scotland, and Wales. And then you can even filter further if you want to see councils which are urban, rural. You can filter by index of multiple deprivation. And then what it shows you then is an overview of the councils that you selected, ranked from the highest scoring to the lowest scoring in a list. And then you can do this filtering by for each of a section. So if I'm interested in bleeds and heatings, I can then click on this button, and then I can see that Westminster is the top ranking council. And I can choose, and I want to find out about the northeast of England. So now I'm only looking at single tier councils in the northeast of England.
I don't seem to be able to see anything that you're clicking. I've just got a static image. Is there something wrong?
Thank you, Sue, for chipping in there if there's an issue.
I
Now we can see.
Is it working now?
No, we can now see something says single tier top left and then district count. It's
Yes.
moving now, yes. Now we can see. Can you move your cursor so that we can see which bit of the screen you're talking to? Don't know whether
Yes.
mine does.
You
Yeah,
okay?
there we go. Right, move it around a bit, it gets bigger, I think. No, go on. Wiggle it. Okay.
Do you need to increase the
Thank
size?
you. Thank you. That's better.
Are you able to see, or do you want me to increase the size?
If you increase your cursor size, or what do you mean the screen? What size the screen thing is? Yeah, put it up just slightly. Yeah, that's good. Okay.
Okay. Can you
Carry
still
on.
see everything?
Yep.
So yeah, so I did mention this is where you can find the methodology for the upcoming scorecards to be published in June 2025. And this is the main scoreboards that I was mentioning, where you can filter by type of council, where you live, and then you can further narrow it down by political control, for example, population. And then you've got your own little league of councils, depending on where you live. But then you've also got this function, which is just type the council where you live. So if someone wants to shout the name of the council, I can look it up.
Camden.
Let's look up Camden.
Oh, Manor. We're hoping to get a CC open there one day again.
There we go. So that takes us to the page for the London Borough of Camden. So we're greeted by this page, which shows us some information. So good news, they have a net zero target for 2030. So that's a really strict target to hold themselves accountable for, and it's for the whole area. So it's probably one of the most ambitious pledges in the UK. And it's going to be interesting to see how they are measuring up against that. It's a very, very big commitment to make. Then you've got some more information about the scorecards. If you just scroll down, you're then greeted by the scores for each of the sections. So I mentioned bigs and heatings, waste reduction and food, collaboration engagement. And then you can expand.
What did they get a penalty for? It was one like 70% and then a penalty of 15. Something they said they were going to do and they didn't do? Oh.
So that's a nuance I was just going to introduce. So if we look at transport,
Yeah.
for example, so they have 68%. Most questions, they are positively marked. So for example, they've done a lot to promote shared transport initiatives. They got 5 out of 6 mark for this. So it means that there are at least 5 different ways to get around, which don't involve driving a car by yourself in this council. If we go down, they have got negative points here for breaching the pollution guidelines from the World Health Organization. So that's where they got minus points. So yeah, for certain questions, the points are not positive, they are negative because they are negative questions. So here it's for breaching the guidelines for PM 2.5 and NO2 levels. However, they haven't approved any kind of high carbon transport projects since 2019, so they didn't get marked, which is a good news for this question. So these are the penalty mark questions, but there's only very few of them. Most questions are positively marked.
Is there an extent to the negativity of it? So obviously, if you're sitting right next to like Drax, for example, you might have quite a higher level of PM10 or PM2.5 particulates. So does it have an whereas compared to like sitting in the wilderness somewhere?
This is an average. We use like a national database, so it's an average level. It's not a perfect measure. It's an average within the council area. It's not a perfect measure. If you want to find localized data, you probably want to do a bit more digging. And then how it impacts the scores. Yes, there are different tiers for this question. So depending on how the gravity of the pollution, then the negative score will be higher. That's why here, for example, it's -1.5 and this one is -1.
So in Chris's
Um,
point, if the council, Chris, does that help? If the council area they're in approve the next stage of DRACs, then they'd get more negative points, or does that help, Chris? Cool. Nice, Don. Carry on.
Then if we want to look at something else, so let's look at collaboration and engagements. So I mentioned before that one of the things we ask councils is how they engage with the community and make sure that residents have a voice to engage on the climate change action plan. So if you click on this, the question, you're then moved on to a new page, which now specifically looks at this issue of resident engagement on climate change. It explains you what we've researched on and how councils could earn points with clarification. So here, the first thing we looked is whether or not so this is question 5B, which is, so I'm just going to jump back to the previous question, just to make sure that, yeah, this is the question I wanted to get. So this one looks at the resident engagement. And so the first tier of the question is, does the council has an ongoing way for residents to influence the delivery of a climate action plan? So it can be done by different ways. If they are convening a climate action network and they're engaging with it, if they have held in-depth workshops and consultation to draft up their next climate action plan, if they have incorporated local resident representation on their climate change committee and groups, and yes, and then listed are the councils which meet the criteria. So starting with the top scoring one, 2 out of 2, and this is where you would find best practice with all of these evidence links that our volunteer found. So if I just go back to the criteria, there is a further point for those who have a climate public engagement plan, so those who have a strategy on how they're going to be communicating about climate change. So the 2 out of 2 is those that we have found to both have a way for residents to engage and also have a strategy on how they're going to be communicating about climate change. And then fingers crossed the link still works. So here you find further information about, this is the Positive Climate Partnership, which is how residents can influence it's an ongoing way for residents to influence the delivery of a climate action plan. And then you've got examples of like how you can contribute and who's involved in it. And then the second link, hopefully, takes us to, yes, their sustainable energy action plan, which will involve communication work.
Nick's got a question. Do you want to take that now or at the end of this section you're explaining, Don?
I can take a question now.
Nick Rosen, do you have a question on that particularly there? Have to unmute Nick. Hello, Nick. Did you have a question right there? If not, we shall proceed. If you don't chirp up, then Nick, can you hear us? No. Okay, carry on, Don. His hand's up. He's not.
Yeah. So there's 2 ways you can really look at this. You can use it to either find best practice example on a specific issue. If you're looking at how councils could engage with their residents, and then you can explore those links. Or going back to the council that we're interested in, which is Camden, you can decide to compare it with another council. So this is just above the table. You can choose a single tier to compare the results with.
Could you compare it with Ashington Town Council? It's in Northumberland and it's a rural council, well, practically rural. So it would be interesting to have one that's completely different to a London council.
Yeah, Asham. How do you spell it?
Ashington. So it's
H-A-M?
A-S-H-I-N-G. I-N-G.
It's not coming up.
Is it G on the end? Ashing?
I-N-G-T-O-N. It's not coming up.
Needs a D-O-N on the end, like your name.
T-O-N.
Oh, T-O-N, sorry.
T-O-N.
T-O-N, Ashington.
Town, yeah, Town Council.
Did you get that, John? Don, can you change it? Ashington?
No, it's not quite. So the reason it's not coming up is because it's a different type of council.
Yeah,
Ashington Town Council is a
right.
district council.
So
you cannot compare a district council.
Could you do Northumberland County Council as a comparison?
Again, it's a different type of council.
Kind of
so you cannot compare two different type of councils.
I'm with you now. Yes, sorry.
So you can compare single tier councils with district councils simply because they have different powers and responsibilities.
Yeah, yeah.
And sometimes they have different questions. So these are not comparable.
Could I ask about Merton and Hammersmith? Because they appear to have similar total, well, they have the same total percentages, but they have different individual percentages. And I think there's an explanation for that, having worked on this, but I think it's useful for people to understand why there might be a difference.
So I've now included Merton. So you've got Camden and you've got Merton next to it. Any section you're particularly interested in?
So it was Merton and Hammersmith, because they've got the same total percentage, but the individual percentages don't add up to the same. So obviously there's a reason for that.
It might be a rounding issue, or it might be the fact that each section is weighted differently.
That's the one, yeah.
So if you open up both comparisons, for example, looking at biodiversity, we can see which action. So for example, Merton has made a declaration that they're going to stop using peat in their horticulture and landscaping projects, whereas Camden hasn't. And at the line, on this line, you can also see the number of councils which have done that. So out of 186 comparable councils, so single tier councils, only 13 of them have. So again, if you click on this, it takes you back to the question page I was introducing you before. And then you've got a much narrower list and the source of the data, which is Pan UK. And if you open this, you can see the pesticide free councils listed here, all in one page. So if you're interested in pesticide, this is how you would find your information.
What a body of work. That's incredible.
Mm-hmm. There's more filter options here if you're interested. If it's too much information and you want to, again, reduce it, you might be interested to find out, okay, what information did they find from FOIs? So information that wasn't available publicly. So it gives you a much narrower scope of questions. And these are the FOI questions we've asked them. We've asked them, are you powered by renewable energy? And there's two steps to that question. The first tier criteria is whether they have a renewable tariff, and Camden has one. And to have 2 out of 2, they needed to have 100% green energy provider. And there's only 5 at the moment which provide energy to council from 100% energy, clean energy sources. This one is also quite interesting, which is, are home owned and managed by the council energy efficient? And again, this is a tiered question. It's not a black or white picture. This time, Camden Council got 2 out of 3 points. So they have been starting this work. They haven't finished it. There's still a lot they still need to decarbonize, but they have started to. Whereas Merton didn't score anything on this. And that's because they don't own social housing. So therefore, they've not been assessed on this question. So we've been able to integrate a lot of detail into this assessment, taking into account local circumstances. And if you wanted to look at best practice, for try to find examples of who's actually done this work, again, we've listed 13 councils which have done the most work in terms of retrofitting their social housing. So to have 3 out of 3, they needed to have retrofitted 90% of their housing stock. And then you've got the list of 17 councils, mostly in Scotland, it seems, that have been able to do that. But no, Telford and Wrekin, for example, has been able to do it. And then again, you've got the evidence link. Time's
Don,
running by,
when
so
you
I think I'm
finish
doing
this section, what I was going to say, yeah, time's running. We can run over a bit. That's okay. It's very important what you're doing. But there was something, one of the sections you want to do about CC members, how they can use the scorecards. I was going to invite Fiona, who's done some work with Climate Emergency UK, to maybe say a bit on that. But where are you at now, Don? Are you happy for Fiona to say some bits on?
Yeah, definitely.
Yep. Right, Fiona. Oh, you have to unmute.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, I'm Fiona. I'm in Durham, and there's 2 other people from Durham here, so I'll have to watch what I say. I've just drawn a triangle with CE UK on one side, and I was a volunteer for them, which I can highly recommend, although they're not looking for volunteers at the moment, because I learned so much about the councils, how they operate, what their remit is when it comes to climate. And I got to learn about other interesting organisations like My Society, who work on local democracy, and I have been using their FOI. Helped put FOIs in on a particular campaign I'm involved with at the moment. So yeah, I could possibly connect CUK with how they can help promote climate action. I was lucky in that when I retired, I joined Climate Action Durham, and they were already running citizens' climate forums with the council. They'd got that up and running, and I was involved with the last 2. We used the climate emergency scorecards to I had the opportunity. I've got no experience in this field, but I felt reasonably confident using the CUK data to stand up at the Citizens Forum with a few slides and say, look, you're doing this well. No, you're not doing this well. Look, a neighbouring council is doing better than you, pinpointing particular things out from the scorecards. Yeah, so, and there was an audience, and it was time for discussion afterwards. We've since had another citizen forum last November. We didn't use the scorecards because there weren't any new ones out, and anyway, it was a bit of a launch for their new climate emergency response plan. But I did use them in the report we wrote up from that forum to I was arguing I wrote the food and waste section, and I was trying to make points about how we wanted, the feedback from the forum was people talking about more circular economy projects. I'm involved, Climate Action Durham is involved in a campaign against a big incinerator in the area. So the scorecards in the report, we put footnotes in referencing some of the other good practice going on around the country. So you can use them like that. We've also set up a climate hub. Phoenix introduced CECs, Climate Emergency Centres, to us, and we had a good turnout. That was about a couple of years ago. We're probably trying to look for better premises at the moment, but we see ourselves as a critical friend of the council. That's the terminology that I think is a good middle ground one. So we offer support. We have offered support in our last climate forum report to the council that, we can host them as speakers. We could, Durham is doing a lot of very good work, and that we want to support. So we as a climate group, want to show willing, invite them to come along, speak, put up exhibitions, use the space. that sort of thing. So it's not all about being critical. It's also saying, yeah, we really like what you're doing. Can we support you further? So we haven't fully analysed how things are going yet, just recovering from Christmas and everything. I think we're being quite sort of self-critical. Are we really making a difference? But we have got a good relationship with the council. We do know who does what, who does the collaboration engagement, who does who the waste officer is. So we're going to try and get, one-to-one meetings perhaps with those people. So that's the way we see the hub playing a part, really. So the sort of CUK, CEC, council climate plans and sort of campaigns all link up, really. And I was rubbish at maths at school, so don't be frightened by the data. It's a website that's easy to use and navigate if you have a few goes at it. And it's an absolute fantastic source of it gives you confidence to go out there and do stuff. But find a group if you haven't got one, because that's what it's all about, isn't it? I'll shut up.
Oh, Fiona, that was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. My heart goes out to all the team in Durham. That's really, you are making difference. And having done these things for 30 years, you can't always tell the ripples that are going on from the actions you take. You can't always see it immediately, but you are making change and you are doing some great
we
stuff.
hope so. I don't know whether Sarah or Richard here wants to add or correct me on anything I've said.
Sarah or Richard, do you want to chip in there, or?
Well, one thing we are doing as well, literally just started, is someone is looking at the agenda for the cabinet meetings, and trying to see any items that have particular climate relevance, and putting it to the council officer. No, sorry, the cabinet member with a responsibility for climate change, to just nudge them, and we're hoping that to ask questions, and we're hoping that we will get questions from our group for him as a man to pose to the agenda. So that's just one more thing we are doing there.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how you managed, Sarah and Richard were in Climate Action Durham before me. How did you manage to nurture good relations with the council? Because that's a question that often comes up. I think there are some parish councillors in Climate Action Durham, so that was helpful. And actually, one of them is taking the campaign on the incinerator into a full cabinet meeting. So yeah, as you say, ripple effect on these things. But yeah, I don't know, Sarah, Richard, have you got anything to say on how you set up that climate forum with the council? Was it difficult? How did you begin?
Oops, I've lost me. I've lost you. Sorry. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, yes.
Carry on, we can hear you.
I think he's just disappeared.
He's just lost. Okay. I think XR Shrewsbury has got a question, then we'll come back to Don for what he wants to share to us at tail end. XR Shrewsbury?
Yeah. I'm just a little unclear on the dates for the data. So Don replied to my question in the chat, saying that like the current data is 2019 to 2023, but does that mean, so for one council, would it mean that some questions are 2019 data and some are 2023 data, or So would you get the full range for each council, or would it be that some councils you investigated fully in 2020? So most of the data would be 1 year, other councils were investigated later.
No,
Is there a way to find that out on the scorecards? Yeah, thank you.
So all the councils were assessed at all the councils were assessed at the same time. What I've put is the evidence range. So obviously we were not going to start looking at projects that happened 10, 15 years ago. So we decided to monitor everything that happened since the climate emergency declaration in 2019, and then up to the present time. So it was assessed in the first half of 2023. So they considered everything that happened between the climate emergency declaration in 2019 to the current time at the time, which was 2023. But every time looking for the most recently available evidence of work. So looking, for example, at the latest published climate action plan at the time. And then we did the same exercise this time. So, but rolling everything by a year. So evidence that might have been valid for a point before might not be this time. So if they, for example, if they hosted a climate assembly in 2019, that is no longer valid for a point. We're looking at more recent engagement. So that's why we rolled out the dates to make sure that councils keep at it basically. And some of these questions, we're even looking for a shorter time frame. For local resident engagements, we want to actually looking at 2023. So we're only looking at
So you mentioned earlier about having a question on is there an ecological planning officer? Would the council only get for a point for that if they still had an ecological planning officer at the point you were doing the final survey, like so in 2023, if they still had one? Or would they get the point if they did have one in 22, but they've sacked them since? Do you see what I mean? Would they, to get the point, would they still...
Because of the scale of the assessment of the climate action scorecards, we're not able to live update the scores. So the scores get published, and then we update them on a 2-year basis. So this is the first time that the scores are being updated. What you're reading is what was true and accurate at the time of the assessment. So things might have happened in the last 2 years, but for the good or for the worse, for best or for worse, things happen very slowly within councils. So I can already say that most of the information, over 90% of the information that you find on the scorecards website now is very unlikely to have changed in the last 2 years. So still, this resource is still valid to be used. And in some situations, there will be changes. And hopefully we'll have captured those changes in the assessment. But because of the nature of the assessment and because of its thoroughness and the amount of work involved, it's not live updated. But it's all done at the same time. It's like a capture in time at a specific point in time, and it's the same time window for every council.
That help, Joanna?
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. Richard, I think we lost you, and do you want to say briefly what you were saying about the climate forum? Did you want to chip in there? And then we'll come to Don for finals.
Hi, yes, sorry. I was on a tablet and it just suddenly ran out of charge, so I've swapped to my laptop. Really just answering Fiona's question. We had a relative contact as a tow home, the low carbon team in Durham Council, and we just worked through her and worked upwards through the team to the leader, and just floated the whole possibility of having a joint meeting, really, and they took it and said, yeah, they paid for the town hall hire, and yeah, we sort of took it from there, and then we've gone on each year.
Brilliant. This is really good to see, you know, all these initiatives, you know, bring change together gradually. I think we're just to say, I don't know if the group's happy to continue for about another 10 minutes or whatever it is we need, just for Don to say his last bits and any last roundups. But it's been really, really useful tonight. There's an incredible body of work you guys are doing there at Climate Emergency UK. We would love to see something in one of the scorecards. I think we sent you an email at one point about how we could give council an extra couple of points if they offered one of their council buildings for a community group use of a climate emergency centre, or whether they gave 100% on the business rates, or if they couldn't do that, if they directed the local group to a local developer and made an introduction, because that's three of the things that can really help get some of these spaces opened up to then be motherships for an alliance of lots of groups who can really do things in the local area. But let's come back to Don. Did you want to say anything about the UK training resources, or anything in kind of sum up towards the tail ends? But it's really important work you're doing, so go for it. Over, as long as you need.
Yes, so I'm not going to cover the rest of the slideshow. I'm just going to give you some next steps on what you can do if you are interested with what you've been hearing today, and what action you can take after today. So the first one is, if you're interested in hosting a local engagement event around the launch of the scorecards and explore your local results once they become available in June, do get in touch. I've put the email address in the chat, so do reach out to us. And if you want to contact maybe your local Friends of the Earth group and other climate action groups acting in the area, and they want to come together and host an event, invite your local councillor and get people in a room together to discuss the results, please do reach out to us. We'd love to support you. We can provide, we'll provide like templates and infographics you can use, or you can have us as a speaker as well. We also have volunteers. We have a network of volunteers, Scorecards ambassadors, who can join the events and share the experience like Fiona did of what it was like volunteering with us, and then answer questions on specific issues. There will be opportunities to volunteer with us closer to the launch, so also email us if you're interested in volunteering for us. Around the launch, it will be about creating press releases for the scorecards. So if you have any media work experience, do reach out to us. We're interested to hear from you. And then I also wanted to share about the local Climate Academy. So we now have a member of staff who work exclusively on this. We've progressed throughout the years and professionalized our approach. So we have a staff member who's delivering the local Climate Academy, which is a 6-week course. Just going back a few slides. A 6-week course which explores all of the sections of the scorecards, and will really help you to go into the details, understanding what is possible for councils to do and how to identify and ask to campaign for. And we run this course now on a permanent basis, and we have a course upcoming which is for campaigners that you can join yourself. There's only very few spaces left. It's starting at the end of the month. I'll just put the link in the chat. And then the next LCA will be for councillors. So when it does come out, please share it with your local councillors and encourage them to join it, because that will give them the information they need to become more advocates. We also created a campaigner's guide, which runs you into details on how you would go from starting fresh with the scorecards to actually using it to ask questions to a council, hosting an event, and building a relationship with your councillor. So that's on our website. There's other organizations you can reach out to, like Friends of the Earth, Hope for the Future. If you've not heard of them, can help you and give free training on how to build relationships with your local elected officials. My Society has built a lot of websites. They built the scorecard websites. So if you like the scorecard websites, they build a lot more. They build right to them, so you can find out who your local MP is, who your local councillor is, everyone who has a responsibility and is accountable to you. What do they know? which is the website that we use to ask freedom of information request. So if there's something very specific you're very keen to find out about, this is what we use to ask our questions about, for example, the local planning ecologist. Fix My Street, if you want to report like a local issues and you want the appropriate council department to respond to you. And CAPE, which is the first collaborative project we did with them, which is a very simple website, which lists all of the climate emergency declaration and action plan. So if you're looking for a more simple resource, they also created CAPE. Yeah, that's kind of all I had to show today. I'm just going to put those links in the chat, but yeah, I'm happy to take any final questions. Thank you.
Absolutely brilliant, Don. Thank you and all the Climate Emergency UK team for all of that massive amount of hard work. There should be a national common reporting framework, I think you mentioned at the beginning, but basically sounds like you are it, and I hope you get a lot more funding and support and many people jump on board. Any final questions or feedback, comments, folks, about tonight?
Just to say that was excellent. Absolutely very helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Helen. Helen, you have to unmute, I think.
Sorry.
Okay.
When the press release time comes in June, is there any sort of pre-planning, like you know, like when the Beaujolais Nouveau comes in on the aeroplane, like a local gathering to present events or, you know, present the data, anything like that? Is that part of the plan that you already have?
Yes, so in May we'll have a briefing call for campaigners. So a month before the scorecard launch, we'll share all the information on like how you can shout out about the results.
Yeah.
And then we'll also have a briefing once the results are launched. So there'll be more events coming from us. So do sign up on our newsletter if you can.
Yeah, I just like the idea of having an event, you know, hiring a space or using a space and having the people who care about that information, just kind of like getting that information and kind of going, oh wow, this is off the press, you know, just sounds like it could be quite a buzz. That's all.
Yeah. Thank you. So to join our mailing list, there's a link I've just put on our website at the bottom of the page. You can get updates from us, and it's not more than once a month.
Yes. Thank you. That's good to know. I'm a bit swamped sometimes. Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
I try to push for it to be even less than that, but yeah, it's once a month at the moment.
I'll sign up to that then. Thank you.
All right, folks. I think we've run most of the time there. Thank you so much to Don. Please put a comment in the chat of whatever you thought, and we'll get these summary notes put up. There is a WhatsApp chat. It's in the chat there. You can save it before we go for the main climate emergency and a WhatsApp chat, and the video from this will be out on YouTube. We'll put that there and some of this chat. But thank you everyone very much for coming, and thank you particularly to Don and all the hard-working team there. You are changing the councils one scorecard at a time, and we really need to keep working on many levels. I'll hand over to Don for last comment. I'll stop the recording after that, and then people are welcome to stay around and chat afterwards, as we usually do. It's just a webinar and a bit of a discussion chat. So let me just stop that recording, and thank you so much to everyone for giving us an hour of your precious time. Keep organising wherever you may be around the